Thank you to Drs. Andrea Weeks and Sean Krosnick for drawing us all together, and for the Association of Southeastern Biologists for allowing me to submit a recorded presentation. Despite not being there in person, I hope I'm able to impart some new perspectives and insights. The music of our lives is about change, and so too can that be said about the sciences of taxonomy and natural history, despite the fact that their products are some of the most enduring legacies of human thought. But let's not conflate these scholarly outputs with stasis, immutability, or inflexibility of belief. Even specimens and collections with their permanent labels affixed to pins, jars, and herbarium sheets as a version of record remain entwined with and are inseparable from today's actions and behaviors. Those semi-structured, terse statements about what, when, and where are gateways into a past that is on occasion messy, makes us uncomfortable, and forces us to reflect. It's our personal and collective responsibility to examine the who in those terse statements, to pull on those notes, and to broadcast our failures and accomplishments, as well as the failures and accomplishments of others, however painful. You've been looking at a lovely example of a grass specimen lodged at the Canadian Museum of Nature, collected by Laurie Consul in 2010 in the Belcher Islands in the southern waters of Hudson Bay. Her excursion there, if you look closely, says supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Laurie passed away a number of years ago and was well loved by her Canadian Museum of Nature colleagues. While employed there, she had the foresight to include the names of local residents like Annie Tukaluk, Annie Amatuk, and others, albeit using the English alphabet. What happens if you do a Google search for Annie Tukaluk, as is often our first point of entry when we don't know where to look? At the top of the search results is a link to the Qikiqtani Truth Commission that gathered testimony about events that took place between 1950 and 1975 from Inuit who had lived throughout this period. Policies and programs motivated by ideological, political, and economic reasons were imposed on Inuit without consultation or consent, with the overall intent of making the North more like the South. Annie Tukaluk gave her testimony about how her community's working dogs were culled by the authorities, which meant abandonment of their nomadic life. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis while living in a settlement in Moose Factory. If you're fortunate to visit the collection facility for the Canadian Museum of Nature in Aylmer, Quebec, you'll be greeted by an enormous mural that depicts the names of collectors, linked together by the counts of plants and animals that they collected together and deposited behind the doors of the museum. It's a depiction of the museum's natural history social network, installed between the main entrance and the staff lunchroom. It sparks a shared story or two when visitors and staff stroll past. Laurie Consul and Annie Tukaluk are two of the connected bubbles on this mural. Another motivation for examining the who on specimen labels might be to reconstruct voyages such as Alexander von Humboldt and Aimé Bonpland's expedition in the early 1800s to Latin America. Wouldn't it be amazing for historians and enthusiasts if we could recreate such a map in near real time as we transcribe labels on their specimens, hunting down images and filling in the gaps between the places great thinkers such as Alexander von Humboldt and Aimé Bonpland visited? Such an exercise is equally useful for contemporary taxonomy because we frequently need to verify type localities, or indeed need to become armchair geographers to pinpoint likely type localities based on temporally adjacent specimen records collected by the very same individual. It helps a great deal to aggregate such data at grand scale because, for example, bats are frequently collected by ornithologists as a bycatch using their mist nets. Curated and then shared as digital records from an array of institutions. So it helps to look at ornithologists and chiropterologists all at the same time if you're interested in either bats or birds. We frequently make lists of taxonomists to assess a national or international state of play, where we try to examine the recruitment and attrition as a rallying call for more resources for taxonomy. Often such lists are based on the publication record alone. Another motivation To examine the who on specimen records is to increase the visibility of early career researchers who are predominantly evaluated by the scientific papers they publish or the grant monies they're fortunate to receive on behalf of their institutions. Can we modernize this assessment system to include specimens deposited in collections? Those metadata are useful indicators of individual organizational skills, ability to cooperate at regional, national, and international levels, and exhibit scholarly due diligence. There have been many such calls to force ourselves to broaden our definitions of scholarly activities, including that for the data we generate, with explicit instructions to create links between the people who generate data and its future uses. That, according to Heather Pierce here and her colleagues in Nature, is what promotes effective sharing. Likewise, we've become rather frustrated with measures such as impact factors and other such arbitrary, opaquely crafted metrics of worth or productivity in science. Here's one of many such declarations that aspire to shift our focus by improving how scholarly research is evaluated globally across all disciplines, and that covers funders, publishers, professional societies, institutions, and individual researchers. But first, let's gauge the scope of our problem. The strings of texts that are lifted off collection labels and turned into digital twins. When these eventually flow out into the world via the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, we appear to have a problem. Here's one example of our Alexander von Humboldt, whose specimens are found in many, many collections throughout the world, each with their own ways of recording his name. This is just as much a problem for contemporary biologists who marry and elect to change their name or have dead names, or whose name is written differently depending on the context, as is often the case in many cultures. The good news is that there's an international team working on this problem, and we published a paper that illustrates the challenges and offers some candidate workflows and solutions. So can we put all this together in a way that handles the very long tail of legacy specimen data, makes use of available machine-readable resources in an intelligent way, does not invent any new identifiers for people, gives control to participants, gives agency to contributors, offers downloads and access points to spark some form of creativity, and gets us thinking more precisely about specimens in credit systems. If we wish to link scientists to their specimens, we have to do this at scale. We have the infrastructure to do this, thankfully, through the Global Biodiversity Information Facility and the exchange standards that facilitates all these possibilities using well-used terms such as recorded by or identified by, two bedrock components that have been featured in this standard from its inception. Instead of unifying all those strings of people names on specimen labels, that would just be sheer madness. And after all, they represent the provenance and should remain near verbatim as possible. Let's layer on top of this links to shared concepts of who these people are or were. And let's not invent a whole new unique identifier for people. Let's use identifiers that are open, verifiable, and already embedded into the social, scientific, and technical landscape. There's von Humboldt's Wikidata Q number on the left, and there's my ORCID ID on the right. Behind each of these are useful bits of information about the both of us. But it would be cumbersome and dull to continually look these up and type them out while transcribing specimen labels. So might we put all these notes together into a crowdsourcing tool and make a bit of music? Bionomia was launched in 2018, rebranded in 2020, and its interface is now available in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German through the volunteer efforts of many people, including Jennifer, Mariana, and Patrick. There are 4 basic steps in Bionomia. Log in using your ORCID ID, visit the Specimen tab in your profile, claim your specimen records singly or in bulk, and then once comfortable with that interface, attribute specimens to others you revere or admire. There's little to no typing, putting full trust in your small actions that frequently result in an outsized effect. The interface is simple with buttons to make your declarations. Jennifer collected this one, Jennifer identified that one, or she both collected and identified that other one. Or perhaps the candidate matches are completely wrong and Jennifer neither collected or identified that other specimen. That's someone who shares a similar name, and so there's an additional button there to say not them. And if you go through the effort of doing this on your own specimen records, as has done Erica, Andrea, and Joachim, why not push an archive of these records to a repository to create a versioned data package and receive a DataCite DOI in return? 100 people, many of whom are early career researchers, have done this from the Settings and Integrations interface in their profiles in Bionomia. Their specimen records are shuttled off to Zenodo, a DOI is assigned, appears on their Bionomia profile, and then may also appear in their ORCID profiles alongside their organizational affiliations and publications, all the while ready to pad one's CV. There's a burgeoning community who attribute specimen records to others, and I call attention to champions like Siobhan Leachman, Sabine von Mering, and Dag Endresen, who not only have attributed 10 million records between the three of them, but have also participated in or led their own grant proposals and organized working sessions at their institutions or in their circles in New Zealand, Germany, and Norway, respectively, and elsewhere in the world. Bulk downloads for publicly available profiles are available in Bionomia, and this has helped engender some creativity and explorations, such as a hackathon at the Meisy Botanic Garden in Belgium under the Bicycle Project, an acronym for Biodiversity Community Integrated Knowledge Library. The topic of their explorations into the links between people and specimen records was Hidden Women in Science, and they produced some marvelous visualizations. Adania Fleming and her colleagues have likewise been producing teaching materials for US-based undergraduate programs on this same topic, entitled Revealing Hidden Figures in Natural History Collections. A team of authors have recognized the need to share best practices in making use of wiki data to disambiguate people and collections, in this case from a paleological perspective. There's no sense keeping these links in one resource, one step removed from the collections that share their data to GBIF. Instead, these links should come to rest at the source and close the loop as a round trip. Staff at Collections and Herbaria will need a flexible way to evaluate these contributions being made in Bionomia, dependent in part on what software systems they use and their local technical support. In any case, zipped up CSV files in a format called frictionless data give them an opportunity to pick and choose some of these outputs, with the eventual aim of sharing these identifiers for people back out into the global community through two relatively new terms in Darwin Core, called Recorded by ID and Identified by ID, so directly from the source where the data are curated. And finally, in what way should machine-readable links between people and their specimens be used by organizations? Well, one possibility is to examine the footprint of an organization by virtue of its affiliated scientific staff who visit other collections in the course of their taxonomic and revisionary work and add their annotations. Those are signals of impact for an organization. And should there be a specimen management plan required of grant applicants, as is being proposed as we speak, then that too will be a driver for the creation of such metrics to illustrate return on investment. But if we do go down the path of creating new metrics of impact, let's do this with care and make it openly reproducible. A final passing thought to wrap it all up. I hope that Bionomia can support inclusive and sustainable research infrastructure for systematics, despite playing a wrong note every once in a while. But it's what we do with the next note that matters, which means acknowledging the past, listening to and lifting up others, and building something of enduring value. Thank you very much.